any of you familiar with the work of Frederick Laloux? Okay, a few of us. Okay, great. What about holacracy? Okay, a few people too. That's great. I'm not sure I am, but I thought I'd ask anyway. We're here to talk about, like, what is it, that we look inside ourselves all the time to find happiness, to find joyousness, and yet I read the other day again that a Gallup poll from 2015 said that only 32% of people are engaged in their workplaces, which means that most people are going somewhere else to find their happiness, right? To find their engagement. It's not at the workplace. And yet, if we're really going to talk about transformation and about purpose, then how is it that we're going to transform the organizations in which we are so deeply involved? So I guess, this panel is such an amazing group because all of them are leaders and or founders of some really dynamic organizations that are here in the Bay Area. So I want each of you to just kind of introduce yourselves, give your names again, but also just like a little bit about what your organization is, what the essence is of it, and how does it relate to transformation when it comes to organizational structures? How do you feel about that subject? So, and maybe before we start, Pam, do you want to do a little grounding for us, or do you want to save that for later?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Sure.
Okay, let's do that. Let's
all stand up.
Okay.
My name is Pam Kramer, and I represent Integral Transformative Practice International, and I serve as the president of the organization, and we're all about transformation. So I thought instead of talking about practice that we'd have an opportunity to do a practice. So I'll ask you to kind of find a comfortable stance, maybe about hip distance apart. And before we do some balancing and centering, which is a very foundational practice of ITP, let's just shake it out a little bit, and I'm gonna put the microphone down so I can do that as well. So just shake your hands, and energy follows the tension. So if your attention is right on your hands, that's where the energy is flowing. So just feel your hands and just allow them to just float up to the ceiling, looking up, and then drop your hands down. And let's do it one more time. Shake it out. You can allow your whole body to shake a little bit if you like. Shake it out. Some people like to really shake. So let that happen. And then drop the arms down. And take a breath, a full deep inhalation and exhalation. And with our feet about hip distance apart, and allow the pelvis to gently rotate forward, and then naturally the knees will bend and the chest will be open. So allow your shoulders to fall downward towards the ground, with the energy moving downward. And then just very gently moving your awareness now and your feet to your left, and allow your body to just rotate off to your left, and then back to center, and then off to your right. And that's being kind of out of balance. And now let's be back in balance in the center. And then allowing your weight to shift to the fronts of your feet. So you're kind of ahead of yourself. In our practice, we talk about this a lot. In our culture, we're always ahead of ourselves. So let's move back a little bit. And then to the heels, oh, I want to be in bed, or what's for dinner, all the moving backwards. So let's come back into a balanced place. Take a breath here. And oftentimes we talk about balance. So this is feeling your feet firmly planted on the earth, feeling balance. And then taking your attention 2 fingers below the belly button to the center of your body mass. And in Japanese, it's called the hara. And in our practice, we use Japanese because we've got emphasis on Aikido in our practice, a peaceful martial art. So, taking a breath to your center, and on the exhalation, feel balanced and centered. And you may notice life has its ups and downs, so we'll get thrown off balance often and off our center. So we have an opportunity to come back always to feeling balanced and centered. Thank you, everyone.
So Pam, thank you. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about your work and ITP and the transformation of organizations within your work?
Yes, so being the president of ITP International for the past 10 years has been a big practice for me. It draws together body, mind, heart, and soul. That's me personally, and the practice in and of itself is a way to cultivate and harmonize all parts of our being. And we do this over a long-term period of time, a lifetime. So we emphasize lifelong learning, communication in the most peaceful, skillful way, work with affirmations as well to author our future and to focus on the purpose of our life and have our affirmations actually support that. Many practices, it's a vast practice, and in our nonprofit organization we have a small mighty team, and we use our practices a lot, especially the one that I just demonstrated for you, balancing and centering, because we're working at a pretty fast clip, a lot to produce, and so we actually incorporate a lot of this work into our day-to-day lives and how we are in communication with each other. So just a little bit about ITP. We have practice groups that meet in the US and different parts of the world. And it's an entity that comes out of the spirit of Esalen Institute, Human Potential Center. And so our main focus and aim is to awaken the world to its fullest potential. And we do this one individual at a time and in group and in society as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Jake Merriman, CEO of Epic Impact. Well,
Correct.
So tell us a little bit about Epic Impact.
I was telling Sai earlier, it's like we're just trying to live up to the name. So at Epic Impact, we empower high-achieving millennial leaders to essentially sell more, earn more, so they can self-actualize, and in that self-actualization, leave the legacy they're here to leave. And what's interesting about transformation internally is we have to eat our own cooking in this. So we have a petri dish of what it is that we share with the clients we work with internally. So there's 2 petri dishes that are happening. One with the clients we work with in their transformation, and also internally in the places where we need to remember to eat our own cooking internally, which is always fun to know how important that is. Mm-hmm.
And you also do a lot of your work in really exotic and wonderful locations.
Yes, so anyone who's here for the panel before, beauty and experience is one of those places where learning happens in an immersive experience like that. So we just brought one group to Guatemala, and we're bringing another group to Guatemala next week, in that spirit of bringing people to beautiful places where there's a range of economic disparity and also beauty and life simultaneously.
Lisa Chacon, COO and co-founder of Impact Hub in Oakland.
Yeah, I was trying to connect the dots of Impact Hub Oakland and the Global Purpose movement, and what we do, we don't really talk about purpose, but we ask you when you walk in the door, what makes you come alive? And that's really at the heart of purpose. And we were inspired by the Howard Thurman quote, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, because the world needs more people who are alive. And it's a place where there are change makers, social entrepreneurs, people who want to make the world a better place, who have maybe come out of corporate life or a corporate career, or are trying to transform their own lives and to be on their purpose while serving the greater needs of the world. So it's a place, it's a community, it's a co-working space, but at the real heart of it is this core meme or question that we ask, which is what makes you come alive? And then you feel that buzz when you walk in. Has anybody been there who's here? Okay, there's a few. A lot of times people say, gosh, I don't know what it is. The energy of this place is just amazing. And I think that's what you feel, is that there are people who are alive there doing their purpose.
I've been there, and it does. It literally buzzes. The atmosphere is remarkable. And I know that you have an especially special Impact Hub in Oakland. And I've been to a couple of others that don't have quite that vibe. So it's interesting. It'd be great to do some kind of study to compare the differences and what makes that happen. So we've got our youngest entrepreneur on the stage with us today, Hossain. And you're the founder and CEO of Crowdcast. So tell us a little bit about Crowdcast and the impetus for putting it together.
Yeah, totally. So back in 2013, I ended up going into the Costa Rica jungle and ended up in this really tiny eco-village and just had a really amazing experience where I was surrounded by masters of Qigong and meditation and permaculture and all these things. And I was like, wow, in-person spaces like this is where you can really connect and learn. And how did I end up here? Because I'm a techie, I know how to build things on the internet. What can I offer? And so fast forward a few years, and at some point started creating, or hoping to create that sort of connective space, but online, because we kind of realized that we wanted to scale the ability to come together and connect. And that's what Crowdcast is. So we ended up building a online platform. It's kind of like Skype, but if you wanted to get tens of thousands of people together and recreate, let's say, the Purpose Summit, but online, you can do that. And we've done that many times. We have about 2,000 live events happening on the platform every month, and the biggest event that we've done had about 30,000 people tuning in. And we just realized the scale and potential of creating connective spaces on the internet. And so we try to operate as close as possible to the Teal principles, if you're aware of Frederick Lulot's work. And we've learned a lot about what works and what doesn't, so I'm happy to dive into that.
Very cool. So we're in a really privileged situation here. We're in California, which is sort of a laboratory in and of itself. I mean, some of the greatest concepts for businesses and original thinking when it comes to organizational structures comes out of this part of the world. And yet, as I was saying earlier, so few people are truly engaged in what they do, right? And if they are engaged with what they do, it's probably outside of their workplace. So I'd really love to know from all of you, is it possible to create a purposeful workplace? And purposeful you can substitute for joyful or, I guess you could even use longing if you wanted to, but I'm not sure it works quite as well with the workplace. But, substitute the word that is most meaningful for you. But is it possible in any environment to create a purposeful, joyful workplace? And any one of you who's inspired by that, go ahead.
I'll just jump in here. At this point, I don't think I'd enjoy being in a workplace that weren't imbued with a sense of purpose. And the people that come to work with ITP International have a strong affinity for the notion of transformation and the work that we do. And I think that's one of the reasons they come to work with us. And they, of themselves, focus on their own purpose as it connects to the circle. So we really value that people are doing the kind of work that is resonant with their heart and ways to cultivate their own development and to support each other. So I think that it's not only possible, it's really necessary that the workplace now has a focus on purpose, on being able to navigate in ways that bring our best selves forward as well, and grow into more of the divine being that each of us is, and then we actually accelerate that process as part of being a group with that same alignment.
How does that speak to you, Jake?
So when it comes to understanding the vision of your people and the needs of the people, I think is really important on the internal team. So I'm really interested in knowing from a team perspective, okay, what does this person need to survive? What does this person need to thrive? And ultimately, what is this person's vision for self-actualizing? What is their personal North Star? And to your point, how does that fit into the collective circle North Star? And when we can start to ask those questions and be really curious, it's certainly not easy to fit all these puzzle pieces together, but I think very necessary. Because just like the old model of, okay, we're just here to hit KPIs and metrics is not interesting to the types of people that are interested into our organization. So it's about meeting the needs of the team in ways that they want to be met.
Lisa.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways I can answer this question, because on the one hand, I have a team of 12 people who work for the Impact Hub. And, so how do we inspire, how are they inspired by our mission and our vision? And on the other hand, we have hundreds of members in other small organizations or startups or freelancers or nonprofits that are based out of our space. And so, I think it's kind of like a hugely, mutually reinforcing inspirational mechanism, that, our team are inspired by their contribution to creating this dynamic home for other people. I think that's one of the things that's come out of our inquiry, what makes you come alive, is that what seems to make people come alive the most is helping other people. So, in some way, that in itself drives that inspiration and that purpose. It's sort of a generative space in that way. And then the, creating a space where those, our members and our customers and clients are, supported with their physical needs, and the Wi-Fi's fast and the coffee's hot, and the printer's working, and they can just get down to business and do their stuff, and just rock the world with the amazing things they're doing. So it's a very generative, inspirational community.
I can add something really quick. I feel like it's required these days. Like if you're gonna be in a organization and you're trying to inspire the next generation, they just aren't as motivated by money. And they've seen what that's done, and they're we feel this burden of the past. And we and those that are young aren't interested in perpetuating that. Maybe some folks are still, but for the most part, not really. And it's almost a requirement, I would say. And that's the baseline. Then the question is, what degree of purpose? Because if you rank the companies that are successful, you can say Zappos has a purpose, right? Their purpose is to create awesome customer service. And that resonates to some extent. You have family values, you have people who are really loving, but at the end of the day, they're still perpetuating people in slave shops creating shoes. Like if you go one step above that, you sort of get beyond Zappos. And so it's like, yes, you need purpose, and it's also to what level of purpose. And the higher you can go, I think, the better it'd be to attract those kind of talent.
Absolutely. So all of you are talking about, some really special environments where it sort of naturally flows. Is it possible to work in an organization that is driven by profit and still have it be purposeful? I mean, you use Zappos as an example, but let's take, as I said, we are in a bit of a microcosm here in California, right? So we tend to be a little bit idealistic, perhaps, that the rest of the world operates in the same way that we do, and yet, worldwide, 14% of corporate boards have women represented on them. I think minorities is closer to 6%. There's a lot of disparity, right, when it comes to sort of the real world beyond our California bubble. So what's the answer to a traditional corporation? It's probably top-down structure. Is there a way to create a feeling of purpose through that? And does structure have to change in order for that to be the case? Jake, I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Specifically about currency, right? This is what you're asking?
Just in general, if we're talking about a corporation that is really driven by profit, an organization that's truly driven by profit.
Sure.
And I don't know if it's manufacturing cars or
Yeah.
washing machines or all of the things that get made out there and that people work for those companies.
So I think one of the things that is important for this community to consider, and the reason that I was asking for discernment around currency and profit, is that the way I see it is that money is the lifeblood of this planet. It is how we organize energy and how energy flows in exchange. And not everybody sees it that way. Not everybody sees it being the energy that allows us to sustain this ecosystem that is perfectly imperfect, right? And so as we're looking to create new ecosystems, I think one of the things that can become purposeful is to value operating cash, to see purpose in the creation of operating cash and how that drives the greater North Star and purpose of the organization to serve humanity at large or the marketplace at large or customers at large. And I think linking those two things, like the North Star of the organization, the mission of the organization, and the production of the formula of turning sales into essentially revenue into profit into operating cash, and recycling that to create more innovation, I think is a really important purpose to have and to value as a love offering to the collective people that we're taking care of in our businesses and to whatever evolutionary structures evolve. So the question about structures is, can we link those two things together? And can we, for companies that have profit as their number one value, can we create systems that prove that it doesn't need to be, that purpose, a higher purpose beyond that, might actually create more operating cash or a different way of exchanging value in the marketplace and ultimately serve the North Star of the ecosystem more effectively and efficiently. I think this is very possible, and I think it's happening.
Lisa, you've had a lot of experience in this, and I know you've got at least one or two thoughts on the subject, so I'd love to hear them.
I have a personal example. I worked in a Fortune 100 company for a decade as a research scientist and product development, and it was, it's a company that's motivated purely by profit. It's, driven by Wall Street demands, and I was an entrepreneur there, I would say. I got some, energy efficiency programs going, and had the new biz dev, totally change their mission to look for clean energy technologies. And but they didn't get it. They really didn't get it. They didn't get that, the value proposition was, a future for everyone's great-great-great-grandchildren. And so I think it's, we're talking about worldviews, and when the worldview is a materialist worldview that's, where profit is the main driver, it's really challenging to shift that conversation. It can be done. There's the B Corp movement. There's, the whole Impact Hub network, and B corporations are based on the premise that you can have business for good. There's lots of pioneering companies and examples of that, but shifting the mainstream is, the needle hasn't moved that much, and we're much farther down the road on climate impacts and no further along in climate agreements and going backwards possibly, right? So I think it's, so that was the impetus to, I was a change maker. I left the company. I studied sustainability for a year in Sweden. I realized that the job that I wanted wasn't out there somewhere, and I had to learn the skills of entrepreneurship and starting something up on my own and with other people who are like-minded. So that whole journey of, sort of failing in that conventional context to really have the kind of impact that I wanted to see led me on this journey of, gaining an entrepreneurial frame, learning how to start something up, which is a very different skill set from working in a big organization. And having to take massive risks and put it all on the line and all of that in order to bring something like Impact Hub Oakland into the world. So, and that now being a home for people who are also making that journey. I call them professional pivoters. There might be some in this room.
It's a great term.
Yeah, who are taking the skill set maybe from a more conventional mainstream career and trying to get on your purpose and create that job for yourself, because it's not out there yet.
Exactly. And thank you. That brings to mind so many examples that I can think of right now of big corporations that are out there, huge traditional corporations, IBM and 3M company, and they're really struggling right now. We know that they're having a very difficult time keeping people on because they're making the decision that you made, Lisa. They're making the decision that they need purpose, and that if the company, the corporation that they're working for, isn't providing that, then they're going to seek that entrepreneurial spirit. And Sai, that's what you did. Right? You went, I don't think you ever were at IBM or 3M, but you did make the decision to start your own company that would enable you to fulfill your dreams and to see something come to fruition. Right? So you want to speak to that? Did you ever give consideration to working for a large corporation or?
Yeah, totally. I've thought about working at bigger corporations, but at the end of the day, there was always this misalignment. It just never felt right. And I was like, I could just leave and stop trying to do the ramen thing and just work at a big company and make a bunch of money and then give myself a couple of years to just do the things that I think would make the most change. But I think my soul would have been just like hating myself the whole way. And one thing that I've definitely learned over the past few years is to follow what's exciting. I think you mentioned inspiring, or what was
What makes you come alive?
exactly? Yeah, what makes you come alive? And I know it sounds fluffy, but it's also been the most optimized route, you could say, to get to where I am right now. And yeah, I wouldn't have had it any other way. And nowadays, I'm seeing more companies. Asana is a good example, actually, that are striving for higher values, and that's cool. I think the movement's building. To add to what you're saying, look up zebras. There's the unicorn movement. Now there's like the zebra movement, which are kind of companies that are more around value adding instead of just making pure money. And so it's happening. There's a swelling that's happening right now.
So Pam, go ahead.
I'll weigh in. Having worked for about 25 years in organizational consulting, and in particular with a health insurance organization, what I noticed with that company, and I worked on the human side, so career development and a lot of kind of team facilitation and that sort of thing. So I think when organizations focus on the human being and what they need and help cultivate more of that spirit in the environment, that change can occur. And I'm seeing, gratefully, so much going on in the area of mindfulness and bringing transformative practices into the workplace. And I think, maybe not in the heartland as much as, on this coast and the other coast, but nonetheless, I think there's like a ripple effect. And because people are really seeking out these meaning and purpose in their work, and also the cultivation of who they are as human beings, that organizations, maybe by default, will need to incorporate these kind of programs. But I think it's really spreading, and I worked with one organization, a coffee company, for a number of years, and they really emphasized different kinds of assessment experiences to help people notice their preferences, their styles, and how to work more effectively with one another. And that was an organization, it was a coffee company that everybody loved the brand, and we're excited about being part of that vision. But also the CEO at the time and the leadership team really incorporated a number of different tools and processes that stimulated the human being and the connection to one another. So that made for a very successful scenario.
Mm-hmm. And it does require reinvention, doesn't it?
Yes.
It really requires thinking way outside the box to create that. So a few people in the room are familiar with Frederick Laloux and his work, and others who've talked about teal organizations. And we all of us on this stage have some fairly big titles. We've got these, president, CEO, COO of different organizations. But there's a big movement right now towards flattening the hierarchical structure. And so my question to you is, how essential is hierarchy to the functioning of an organization? And can an organization successfully operate with everybody being essentially on the same level?
Go.
So in theory, yes, but it depends on how we're actually looking at that structure. Even someone like a Jack Welch, who's the CEO of GE, spent a lot of time with the new hires at his company, like being the most junior person on the team. So even within the old paradigm, the paradigm of messing with hierarchy was an intelligent concept for understanding how to function in the organization. We operate with like a blended solution. There's companies like Consensus who are building products on Ethereum, smart contracts, so that maybe one day there are these agreements that can be created where it's totally flat and then there's a consensus amongst the organization. I think that's going to take a few years to really manifest that and test that and fail and succeed and iterate. And even a company like Consensus has a blended solution where there's hierarchy and there's also collective voting that happens. So we have anybody on our team can submit a proposal and have their voice be heard and integrated from the pod or the team to the leadership team. So we're attempting this and imperfectly. And I've also gone to the extreme of just letting everybody do whatever they want and see what happens, and this also has consequences. So, as we predicted, but it's nice to give them that freedom to know, like, hey, cool, here if you want complete autonomy, here's what it feels like. And then, okay, we tighten the ship a little bit. So.
I'll say one thing here on this one. I think we're in a period of experimentation, and I've done the same thing, Jake, just kind of like pulled way, way back. And when people know what their role is and what the priorities are, it works pretty nicely. And yet I noticed, there's a draw to leadership, so we're in this very interesting period of time, I believe, in our culture, in our development, where things are really shifting, and yet we haven't found our way into the new framework. So I would just suggest to keep on keeping on with experimentation and noticing what happens when an organization becomes flat, and is it effective? Is it working? Is it meeting the vision and the organizational goals? And if so, what's priming that pump and continue? And if it's not, so I think flexibility is really essential in this period of time, and probably is going to be for the foreseeable future.
So one thing that I found to be pretty good analogy is to think of an organization like an organism, right? So you have an organism is a bunch of different systems working together. Your body has organs. Some of them are centralized, like your nervous system, and some of them are decentralized. You need both, and it seems like the right mix of those things. Our body knows what that is, but we don't know what that is for human organizations of some scale. And it's going to take experimentation. And I found that in some ways, we have top-down processes. Like for programming, it's actually really, you got to be really, really process-oriented and be very strict to ensure that bugs don't get shipped and things don't break. That's almost militaristic, And then when you come to decision-making, then we have like more of a widespread. Everyone can bring in ideas, and so it's more about, I feel like, feeling into what. And discerning what parts of the business can be made decentralized, teal, and what other sort of processes and decisions can be made through a structured system. And I think it depends on the organization, your intention, and just it's going to require a lot of experimentation.
Do you feel inspired to speak to that, Lisa?
Yeah, we've also experimented with holacracy and sort of had the same dance of, top-down to more distributed leadership and decision making, and I won't kid you that it's been easy. And holacracy in particular is it's imperfect. I think what Pam said about we're so conditioned to be operating from the prior models that people expect bosses to make decisions, and they don't have. They just tell me what to do. And so I find that actually building the capacity in my organization to be able to hold that responsibility, and particularly when we had some very young, inexperienced, employees, and to give them the responsibility to make these really big consequential decisions for the company, that made us as founders nervous. So, there was a tension between how much autonomy we were able to, or felt comfortable giving our team when we were, working with holacracy very, very closely. So we ended up with sort of a hacked, modified version of it that didn't quite, there's a lot of people hacking holacracy right now, and we were part of that group of a cohort of companies trying to make it work. And I still don't think we have a perfect model. And we've actually, I mean, I'm going to be stepping out of an operational role at the end of the year. So we've hired an interim CEO, and don't tell anybody, this is going to be announced next week. But
It's being
officially,
streamed
this
as we
is
speak.
this is the stealth announced with soft launch. And I think, we probably won't be working with holacracy because that's not his thing. So, it's it was an experiment, and now he's going to do it his way, and that's okay. That's all right.
I think it does require experimentation, as Pam was saying, and all of us are saying. At Greenheart, for example, we have about 140 employees, and we still have some of the traditional structure, but it's much more of a serve and support way that we work from, in the hierarchy, I guess you would say. But what's happening, and what I really love, is that there is of committee forming. There are all these groups that are forming, and a lot of them form on their own, and they are deciding, they're seeing things that they want done within the organization. They're taking it upon themselves to make decisions about things like creating a greener space to work in, or getting more involved with the community. And they're doing it on their own, and they're doing a great job, and they don't need to hear from me or Emmanuel necessarily to do that well. And in fact, they don't want to hear from us. And that's awesome, So we had planned for the last 10 minutes or so at least to bring all of you guys into this conversation. So we'd like to form small groups, either 2, 3, 4 people, and just talk a little bit about what's resonated with you in this discussion. And if you have any burning questions or comments that you'd like to share with us before the end. So let's take, let's see, we've got about 9, 10 minutes left. So why don't we take 3 minutes, maybe a minute and a half for each person if you're in pairs, or a minute if you're in bigger groups, to just talk about what captured your attention, if you think we're missing any key elements of what we should be addressing up here, and then we'll bring it back. So why don't you hit it? Go ahead. back in. And let's see, we're going to pass a mic somewhere. So let's bring it back. Would anybody like to share what came out of their conversation? Got a lovely, let's see, we had a mic a minute ago. There it is, okay. This lovely young lady.
Thank you so much to everyone on the panel. I wanted to offer something to the group. So my name is Allison Rowland, and there are professors at Harvard, Bob Keegan and Lisa Leahy, and they wrote a book called An Everyone Culture Building Deliberately Developmental Organizations.
Could you repeat the title one more time?
I'll say it. Let me explain to you what it is, and then I'll tell you the title again. So what I think is missing from this conversation is the idea that people can get more from their work that goes beyond the profits that are made or even the mission of the organization. So I work in education, and so I have a very easy time getting behind the mission of the organizations that I work for. But what they talk about is the new incomes at work. And what they say is that there's this new income that is experiencing your own unfolding at work. And it's based in adult development theory. We think that, when we're 22, we're kind of fully baked, fully formed, but research shows that people continue to develop, and we all feel it in this room, given the people who are here. We continue to develop in our 30s, our 40s, our 50s, 60s, all the way through, and we reach higher levels of development. So in organizations, in businesses, they have found places that encourage people's development. The culture of the organization literally pulls people into their own unfolding, unleashing their better selves. We all have limitations. We all have blind spots. And organizations can do this, and it is an opportunity because we've moved away from some of the centers for community that exist that have done this in the past. And so I work, what I'm trying to do is to help school districts to do this work for educators so educators can bring their best selves to educating young people. But I think there's a big part that's missing in that it is possible to have the bottom line intertwined with people's development and their own unfolding at work. Give them a place where they can learn and grow, and that benefits, if you care about profit, your profit. In my case, I care about the business of developing people, and it should be that education is the domain of, has this, like we should be the experts in this. In reality, so the authors are Lisa Leahy and Bob Keegan, and the book is An Everyone Culture, Becoming a Deliberately Developmental Organization. And it really, I wish they were on the panel because they are, and not that you all were not fantastic, but they would offer another perspective that I think really taps into some of the conversations we've been having.
Thank you. That's an extremely relevant point. We've got a hand up right here. Let's get another comment.
Curious about the panel, how you go about helping someone figure out their purpose, maybe even before you hire them, so that you don't hire someone that's, their purpose misaligns with yours in the long term. I don't know how you do that, and I was just curious how one might.
I can share a little. One of our secret tools is we like to hire our clients. We already have a withstanding relationship with them. And the way that we get to understanding their purpose is just through appreciative inquiry, asking really good questions, and creating environments where imagination and kind of the essence of their truest self can come through. It's really about asking the right questions, allowing them to discern, and testing for ecology and congruence with the answers that are coming through, and continue to ask until we get that congruence.
So sadly, we've got 25 seconds left. So we're not going to be able to address a whole lot more. I do want to address your point, your wonderful point about personal and professional development, and to say that we are seeing so much these days at Greenheart and throughout industry and organizations that professional and personal development is absolutely key. And that without providing meaning, thank you so much for sharing that, it's an essential point, that without providing people the opportunity to grow within the organization, not only as a part of the organization itself, but within themselves, that is absolutely essential. So we're going to take an extra 20 seconds or so and just go through and say your final point, any final thing you'd really like to share about this before we close.
I want to piggyback here because the workplace is absolutely the opportunity for us to express our gifts, to continue to learn, to realize more and more of what our potential is. So I am all for exactly what you said there. Yes.
Cool, same. Yeah, we have a chief alignment officer on our team, and that's part of his role. His wife's over there with a big smile on her face.
Yeah, I think, weaving in that last question, there's, and tying that back to what makes you come alive, there's some jobs that people don't want to do in the company. I've done some of them in mine. And, it's like, how do you balance those things that nobody wants to do, those nuts and bolts, or, taking out the trash or something icky. But, there are some bookkeepers who love bookkeeping, and there are people who love organizing things. And so it's like finding, those things that make them come alive, and finding that alignment and that fit.
And Sai, you get the last word.
Okay, so many things I could say. I think I'll just kind of leave it with like a silver lining, which I've noticed, which is that this process of making organizations more evolutionary, where it's focused on self-management, wholeness, evolutionary like purpose. The cool thing about it is when you look at the businesses out there, the ones that are actually trying this out more generally have a pretty high retention rate for their employees, are starting to get bigger market share, and their actual bottom line metrics are doing generally better, actually pretty well. And you can actually take that and say, hey, old company who's in sort of a more traditional system, if you want to succeed in the traditional world, you actually have to take these new models and bring it to your organization, which is exciting because then you have like a pitch. And in that pitch, it forces these older companies to really ask some serious questions about transparency, about how we organize ourselves and the things we should be focusing on. So there seems to be an access point for millions of organizations throughout the world to start seriously transforming the individuals that work for them.
Hear, hear. Yeah, Pam.
One quickie here, just a shout out for humor, joy, and love in the workplace.
Amen.
And right here. Thanks.
And fun.
And fun. Gotta have fun.
Thanks, guys.